I want to take these moments that we have together and present some information from a counseling point of view. And it deals with marriage conflict. I'm not happy. This often is heard in counseling situations where a couple comes in. Let me give you a couple of scenarios. After several years of marriage, a wife tells her husband that she is not happy. She offers no explanation of what is creating this unhappiness. She is just not happy. You need to move out so I can find myself. After a decade of marriage, a husband informs his wife he is not happy and has not been for a number of years. He tries to explain to her, but his reasons are tenuous and vague. The wife is taken by surprise. She never suspected anything was wrong. He says, I am leaving so I can see if I still love you and want you in my life. After several years of marriage, 2 children, brand new home, and just returning from a knockout dream vacation, a wife says she is not happy. She suggests she and her husband separate so she can find herself and see if she still loves him. She needs some space. More and more of this kind of marital logic is cropping up. The person on the receiving end is stunned. They tell me there was no warning signs. The statements come as a surprise attack. The verbal mortars are bone rattling. The mate who is asked to leave is thrust into a world of darkness, despair, and depression. They feel pinned down under heavy artillery. In some cases, the spouse will even impose his or her unhappiness on the other, saying, I know you aren't happy either. The method to create the perceived space of separation is for the shell-shocked mate to find another place to live. No time frame is proposed. Counseling is rejected. The other mate wants to live as if he or she were single again, even if they have children. The defecting mate expects the shell-shocked spouse to continue supporting him or her as if they were living together as a married couple. He or she should contribute financially, even though there is now 2 households. The spouse who left is expected to continue to pick up and drop off the kids, take their child to sports practices, but is often excluded or made to feel unwelcome at intimate family functions. So, should the mate move out? If the mate says, would he or she be imposing his or her will upon the other spouse? Wouldn't it be more loving to move out and try to re-court the disinterested spouse and allure him or her back into the marriage? If the mate says, wouldn't that cause more harm and ill will, perhaps even leading to the spouse threatening or filing for divorce? And what about the children? What if the one mate wanting space abuses a substance like alcohol? So what is the right thing to do? How would you help this man or woman in such a situation with biblical wisdom? How would you provide hope? Can you really work at reconciliation? I believe there are a few commonalities that you will find no matter what the specific details of each individual marital dispute may be as described. Addressing the commonalities, I believe, is a starting point. Your data gathering would provide you with a specific biblical course of action. So what are these commonalities? I think the first one is to leave or to stay. In the counseling cases I have dealt with, this is a core topic. The dissatisfied mate has asked the spouse to leave. The claim is to have the freedom to decide whether there is a commitment to the marriage, whether love is still present, or just the space to find oneself is needed. Often the distant mate claims the spouse needs to change, but does not want to live together. Yet somehow, in some mysterious way, the mate will know whether change has truly occurred. It becomes more complicated when there are children involved. The situation is often reduced to an informal separation or a divorce setting whereby the spouse agrees to prescribed visitation periods and must now incur the maintenance of two households. In all the cases I have dealt with, the first bit of counseling I provide is for the spouse to return home. Why, you ask? The premise for leaving, the length of time to be separated, the areas that need addressing, the how-tos in addressing those areas, and most importantly, the evidence of change are not clearly outlined. When children are involved, it is usually the husband and father who is asked to leave. The children are left without the presence of the predominant spiritual leader. Change is impossible to be observed or measured. Now, someone might say, he has never been the spiritual leader in the first place. That may be absolutely true, but during counseling, this man realizes this, repents, and resolves to be the husband and father God requires of him. Is he to accommodate the wishes and desires of a spouse out of step with God's word about reconciliation, or be obedient to the Lord? He should move back home. How is this received? In most states, to my knowledge, because the home is joint tenancy, the one spouse has no legal claim to prevent the mate from returning home. Unless there is a document of domestic violence or abuse, an order of protection, the mate has every right to return home. The spouse can be more than credulous about the matter, in fact, downright belligerent. But the higher calling is obedience to Christ and embracing the rule and the role as a spiritual leader, demonstrating God-honoring change. And then there's the fear of reprisal, and this is not unusual. Don't be surprised if the person you are trying to help returns to the next meeting time with you distraught. As a biblical counselor, expect this manipulative course of action. Kind of goes something like this. If you don't leave, I will. Or, if you come home, you will make my life miserable. Is this what you want? Then okay. I will somehow learn to live with this uncomfortable situation, but the hope of anything changes is very remote. The problem with this logic, I think, is plain and simple. First, the spouse wanting the distance will be exposed to the light of the gospel and truth. Darkness hates light because of such exposure. The spouse may not have the freedom to live as they aspire to, going to bars with friends, drinking, no built-in babysitter, spending money as it suits them. Secondly, the spouse's miserable condition was never the mate's fault. Now the mate has contributed to creating an environment that did not foster marital harmony. However, even if that were true, the spouse has a responsibility to respond biblically under such harsh and difficult times. So the return of the mate only creates a hardship because of the attitude of the spouse who wanted freedom so intensely. And then there are threats of divorce. So the mate returns. Two things may happen initially. The spouse realizes the return is inevitable and nothing can prevent it. So the spouse lives in a platonic relationship. They sleep in separate bedrooms or rooms of the house. They do not eat together. There is little to no socializing. Laundry is done separately. Or the spouse who is disgruntled moves out. They might even enter the home using two separate doors, the front door and the basement door. They continue to live separate lives. But if the mate refuses to cooperate in ways that promote the spouse attempting to live like a single, threats of divorce will take place. For example, the wife or the mother wants to enjoy her Friday nights with friends, drinking, bars, and dancing. She needs someone to watch the children. So she calls her husband, the father of the children, whom she can't stand unless she needs something, and asks him to provide child care services. In the past, the husband and father may have done this for two reasons. One, fear of threats of the divorce, and two, thinking this may be a way to soften her heart. Usually during counseling, this is exposed as manipulation. If the counselee acts upon the counsel, does not provide child care so the wife can party, divorce is threatened, and oftentimes papers are filed. Well, someone says, if he would only cooperate, isn't that better than his actions causing the divorce? Did his actions of not participating in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but rather exposing them, did that really cause the divorce? The actions revealed what were already seeds concealed in the human heart. And then speaking the truth. Fear is huge in such situations. Generally, it is huge in most counseling situations. So the counselee often is timid, shy, and hesitant to speak the truth in love. Again, the fear of causing some reactive response from the unhappy mate influences how he may approach conversations on controversial subjects. Why are you acting this way? You agreed to such and such. Why are you being so vindictive and mean? How do you expect me to trust you if this is the way you are going to act? The spouse says. I believe there's a rule of thumb, and I would suggest it is even biblical. You reap what you sow, Galatians 6:7. How does the estranged mate respond to something like that? To avoid entangled argumentative conversations in which one feels they need to justify their actions, I might suggest this. Anne, I love you and am committed to this marriage. I do not believe it is hopeless. I know we both need to do a lot of changing, but you have chosen a course of action that we must both abide by now, namely, you have consulted with and are following the counsel of your lawyer or ungodly counsel. You have employed the legal sword. It cuts both ways, and we are both realizing the consequences of using this method. Neither one of us can have it both ways. Stated differently, she has filed for divorce and all the perks pertaining to thereof. This also includes the ones that displease her. The legal sword includes the regulations and guidelines set forth in legal documents, even when it is not convenient or pleasant to either spouse. And then redeeming teachable moments. Often in such situations, and even those of legal standing, such as separation and divorce, the mate who would be deemed as the weekend parent, that mate must avoid the practice of taking his weekend and lavishing the child by indulging the child's every wish and whim. Without further discussion, we know the reasons for such practices. What I am more concerned about is using this precious time in a spiritually constructive fashion that I call teachable moments. I saw a weekend father do this with his young daughter, who was then age 6 or 7. He purchased Bible story books, videos, music. Now, he did not indoctrinate her. Bible stories were part of her bedtime routine. If she became tired of the music, something else was listened to. Bible videos were treated the same way. This father would sense those teachable moments and step in with age appropriate biblical truth to help mold the child. We need to realize something at this juncture. In many situations, you have a spiritually mixed marriage. One spouse is not a believer or claims to be, but is certainly not living like one. With the spiritual leader being out of the home, the limited time and exposure is crucial. Each opportunity must be seized. I know a father who is practicing this principle. Just the other day, he had an opportunity to help the child learn patience in waiting for a desired outcome. Her primary caregiver is not a patient person. The young girl mimics what she observes. This dad seized the opportunity to help his daughter understand and practice this character trait. Here are some scriptures to encourage the estranged spouse, almost like homework assignments. Have them read Romans 5 1 through 5, and then answer the question, in what ways is this passage teaching endurance, perseverance, and the fruit of the Spirit? Have them read Genesis 6 through 9, the story of Noah building the ark. Obedience to specific instruction is vitally important. Imagine if Noah skimped on building products. What if he decided that the upper right-hand corner really did not need to be tarred on the outside, on the inside? The outside was sufficient. We have the powerful verse that God shut the door but remembered Noah during the storms of his life. How does Noah show implicit obedience to the plan of God? And then Daniel 1:8. How important is it for the counselee to premeditate how to respond to the disgruntled spouse? Make a list of the hot button topics. Formulate a firm but loving biblical response. If you know you will have contact with the spouse, think ahead of what topics may arise and how to respond. Matters pertaining to the imminent divorce, allow the lawyers to conduct business and conversations. How can this spouse premeditate the pressure points to prevent sinning? I'm sure there are many other passages, Bible characters, and the like that can be utilized. Why not begin making a list of them and stand ready to offer help to those who are in marital discord? Additional teaching is available at mcmbce.blogspot.com.